pandemonium. Use my fangs to murder ya. Yo soy la diosa, los demonios no me controlan. Soy culebra. What's up, everyone? 7 Octoberz here with another episode of Nightmare on Sedgwick Avenue. This is season 5, episode 17. So had a lot of dope guests so far. And today I have another local actually guest who I've been trying to get on the podcast. I'll give like a kind of brief intro of who he is and how I came across his page. So I think I was on Instagram and I follow a couple pages. I think it was the Adams Avenue Theater here in San Diego. And I saw that there's been screenings here. And I kept seeing like the name Popcorn Reef pop up. And I was like, oh, okay. So I started following them. And then I hit up the main person that pretty much runs the page, which is Eddie, who I'm going to have as a guest today. And he does film screenings and he's kind of branching out to other venues as well. So I'm going to have him on today so he can talk a little bit about, you know, his journey and all that. And he also has a connection with the hip hop world too, which we'll get into. So without further ado, hey Eddie, how you doing?
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Thank you for coming on today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Gabby. This is really cool.
Yeah, no problem. And I kind of like to start it off a little bit. I don't know if you want to kind of start a little bit with your journey, because as far as like maybe like what made you fall in love with film in the first place?
Yeah, I've been in love with film since I was probably 4 or 5 years old, something like that. And I think when I look back at a lot of my early memories, they involve weird movies that like I probably should have been watching when I was like 4 or 5 years old. So movies like Total Recall and RoboCop and
Oh yeah.
like, kind of bizarre. I guess that's both Paul Verhoeven stuff, but like bizarre things that like I saw at an age where I think that I was still kind of trying to figure out what the world was in general. So it
Hmm.
made me feel a certain way, and I've been kind of trying to understand those feelings, I think, still to this day. And that's what I find cool about movies now, as I've
Yeah.
my own personal journey and looked at, what this stuff actually is all about. Like it's
Yeah.
it's cool to look back and see what kind of leaves an imprint on you.
Yeah. And who like was in your was it somebody in your family or a friend that got you into movies, or who was like that person that got you kind of like watching movies for the first time, if you remember?
I think that everybody in my family is really into movies.
Yeah.
And like, so my mom and dad were both into movies a lot, and they told me that I like almost taught myself how to read by like looking at the newspapers
Oh.
of like
Yeah.
I was born in 1988. So like back in like 1993 or 1992 or something like
Yeah.
that, I was trying to figure out when the movie would play somewhere. So I looked at the newspaper ads and, so they were taking me to movies and someone
Yeah.
was playing RoboCop. It's probably my dad. So, yeah, we've
Yeah.
all been, and my sisters all really are really into movies as well. And a lot of them have worked professionally in the entertainment industry too. So,
Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I can relate to that too, because we were like a huge like movie family too. Like especially like the younger generation probably won't ever get to like feel like the going to like on Fridays to like the video store, like Hollywood
yeah,
Video or Blockbuster. Like that was our thing to do like on the weekends, is like pick a movie and then just watch it for the rest of the weekend, or pick a couple movies to rent out. That was like the fun part of like
it's
getting
such a
to
fun
choose.
time.
Yeah. I know I always wanted to work there and I was like I never got the opportunity, but uh and what movie, like, because you mentioned like RoboCop and stuff like that, like what movie you think made you like for sure, like, I was like I love movies, like what's your standout movie that stands out to
My
you?
favorite, I mean, I have like a lot of favorite movies, so I don't
Yeah.
even know if I would say it probably is my favorite movie anyway, but like I'd say that Billy Madison is my
Okay.
favorite movie. And that was another movie that I watched, I think, for the first time in like, kindergarten or maybe second grade.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I've been watching it still, and I still think it's as funny as it was when I first
Yeah.
saw it. But that movie made a big impact on me. Another one was Bad Boys, the first Bad Boys.
Yeah.
Actually, I'd say Bad Boys 2 is one of my favorite movies now. But
Yeah.
when the first Bad Boys came out, when I was in, I think, third grade,
Hmm.
it was such a big, like a giant, like spectacle of a movie, and everybody was talking about it at school, even though none of us really were like able to see it.
Yeah.
And it seemed like a big deal because I think Fresh Prince was out, and we'd
Yeah.
watch that every week on TV, and it was like, whoa, this kind of R-rated like action movie with Will Smith looks really cool, and but I can't see it.
Yeah.
That was part of it too. So I think that kind of built up a big furor inside of me.
That's cool. And what made you like? Because obviously, I just mentioned in the intro that you do film screenings, right?
Yeah.
And what got you into doing that, or like how long have you been doing it, and what got you into wanting to do that?
So I've been doing these just by myself, just starting this year in early 2023. But I've been the marketing manager at Cinematic Void going on like 3 years now.
Okay.
And Cinematic Void is, I'd say, one of the biggest cult film screening series in the world. And
Mm,
I was lucky enough to join the team back during the pandemic.
okay.
Um, and before that, I'd been going up to LA a bunch and going to the Cinematic Void screenings and also the Beyond Fest screenings. The stuff that the American Cinematheque was doing up
Yeah.
there is just really something else. And there's nothing like going up to Los Angeles and the magic of going into those old school theaters and watching something, especially like on a film print.
Hmm.
Especially for me living in San Diego, like the trek up there and the trek back
Yeah.
is kind of a really like it makes it even that much more special.
Hmm.
So there was something about the spectacle that kind of got recreated for me and that's kind of, I've said that like on our description on our website and stuff. It's really kind of about the spectacle of movie going. More, that's what I'm trying to do with Popcorn Reef, and I think that all film screenings series that do that or do that well, because a movie is a movie and you can watch it at home and you'll feel a certain way from it. But if you can create kind of like what you were talking about with going back to the video store or whatever that feeling was, where during the time when movies were larger than life rather than now where it's kind of, even if there's a really awesome movie that comes out, it does feel a little disposable just because it comes out and then something else comes out the next
Yeah.
week.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'll go to the movies and see new movies sometimes like 4 or 5 times a week. So I'll have a lot of awesome experiences and I'll love the movies. And I mean, there is a little bit of difference in the movies themselves too, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's not like, oh my God, I saw something that just kind of changed my life, really. There's not really enough time to process that in
Yeah.
today, the way that things are coming out today. And then
That's
they
true.
throw this stuff on streaming without you being able to see it in a theater.
Yeah, that
And
is
now
true.
I've got a laundry list of things I need to do rather than being in awe of it, I
Yeah.
guess, being able to say it.
Yeah, and I feel like it's important too, like the importance, because I just had like Trash Max and see it on 16 millimeter. And I told them like the importance of like
That's
showing
awesome.
films, right? Like shout out to them as well. Like, because I feel like it's a different experience. Like I've always gone to the theater, so like that's like like my happy place is what I call it, one of my happy places.
Yeah.
And it's just like a whole different experience because I noticed like now with phones, like back in the days we didn't really have phones, so it's not like you could watch TV and pay attention. But now what I noticed, and I don't know if it happens to you, is like I'll be watching something on TV or streaming, and like I catch myself like scrolling on my phone. I'm not even paying
Yeah.
attention to what I'm watching. But when I'm at a theater, like you're kind of forced to like put your phone away and just kind of experience the film, and it's just a different experience.
I completely agree, and I'm guilty of the same thing. I was doing that last night, and it's
Yeah.
like, oh, there's a boring part. Okay, and then I miss something, and then I rewind it, and it's like,
Yeah.
what am I doing? Like, take the phone away from me, please.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's why I think it's like important like that you're doing that, and it's pretty dope. And another thing too is what have you found, because I know you just kind of started a little bit, but I mean you've been working with like Cinematic Void. What's one of the things that you like enjoyed so far about screening films, and what's like one of the hardest things that's been the most difficult, I guess you can say?
I've enjoyed with Cinematic Void, I've enjoyed the whole process because I don't actually pick the films. Jim, who owns and runs Cinematic Void,
Hmm.
picks and does all the programming there. So normally, by the time the screening comes around, and if I'm up there in LA, I get to sit back and actually watch the movie. But what I have not enjoyed, particularly since I've been doing these on my own, has been the part of me actually sitting down and watching the movie, even though it's fun for me to like come up with the idea for the screening and it's fun for me to pick the trailers before and all that.
Uh-huh.
Like it has not been the same, especially if I just rewatched the movie to kind of make sure I still want to show it or something like that.
Yeah.
It's not, especially also, I've got kind of 100 different things going on at once while we're doing the screening. I might not be able to sit down and watch the movie.
Hmm.
Kind of sucks not being a participant in the audience, I guess.
Yeah.
Kind of frustrating about it.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, because you're like you have to make sure the show is running smoothly and all that stuff. Especially if you're doing it on your own, which is like another huge feat. Um, and what's your favorite movie so far that you've screened, and why?
Let's see. That's a good question. Let me think about it for a second.
No worries.
Really good question. I would say, well, so far, really the like dream screening that we did so far that I honestly had in my head since the beginning of trying to do Popcorn Reef was this double feature of Point Break and Prayer of the Roller Boys.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the writer and director of Prayer of the Roller Boys, Peter Iliff and Rick King, Peter wrote it and Rick directed it. They went on to write Point Break together.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always been a huge fan of theirs and a fan of what both those movies represent as far as kind of capturing Southern California culture, especially during that era. And that was
Yeah.
really a big part of what I'm trying to do at Popcorn Reef is show films that capture whatever side of Southern California there is, like whether it
Yeah.
be a crime film or surfing culture or just general culture. And so I had that idea as like, oh, that would be cool to do this one day.
Mm-hmm.
And I, on a whim, just kind of hit them up and they were willing to come down and actually talk about the films too. So to have them there was a huge honor. And it was also like, after that, I was like, well, what do I do next? Because honestly, like that was kind of like the original idea for all of Popcorn Week to get to a certain threshold. So we've
Yeah.
already, but I think there are plenty more screenings we can do. But
Yeah.
yeah, that'd be my favorite so far, I'd say.
That's pretty awesome. And do you plan that like to have more of that? Like, because I know I think Cinematic Void does that a little bit. Correct me if I'm wrong, where they have like either like cast, crew, or directors like come in and talk and then watch the film, or sometimes the Q&As after the film. Do you plan on doing more of that too, like in your future screenings?
Yeah, at Cinematic Void, since it's up in LA, a lot of times most of, the either the cast or the director or the writer or whatever is in town and
Yeah.
they've been very generous with being able to come in and help with, doing the Q&A and all that.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. And that's a big part of, being up in LA and seeing those screenings. I hope to continue to bring that down here. I mean, it depends
Yeah.
on if you want to drive down here. I
Mhm.
want to create an environment where people are excited to come here, and I think that they will.
Yeah.
I'm also always willing to do like video intros. We
Yeah.
just did a show that you were helping out
Yeah.
at Gabby, the movie Orgy, and we got Joe
Yeah.
Dante to film a video intro for us before the show started because he couldn't make
Yes,
it
with
down.
like the intro with the dog in the video. That was pretty hilarious.
Oh, I didn't even hear that.
Yeah, yeah. I think because you finished talking about that you sometimes obviously some people can't come down, down here to San Diego, so
Yeah.
you'll try to do like video ones, and then you mentioned the Joe Dante, and that's where we cut off because I was like it was hilarious, like the intro for the movie orgy that you had.
Yeah, he filmed that. That was his own idea, of course, to
Yeah,
have the dog there on the intro. But that was really cool, and I'm really glad that we could do that screening because, um, not a lot of venues are willing to do, not even just in San Diego, but in general, to show a 5 hour free screening movie.
that's
And
true.
I'm really glad to be working with Jeff down at the 10th Avenue Arts Center because he was all about it. And that's what we're trying to do at that venue specifically for like a subsection of our screenings is
Hmm.
being able to show movies that couldn't show not even show anywhere but like that wouldn't get a chance anywhere else and do some really really experimental off the wall stuff.
Yeah, shout out to him, to Jeff, for that. That was pretty dope.
Yeah,
And I was gonna say too, like I think I kind of skipped a little bit, but I didn't ask you for those that are listening in. How did the name Popcorn Reef come out? I know you told me a little bit, but for those that don't know, how did that name come up?
yeah, the idea, I don't know exactly how it came up in the first place, but
Yeah,
kind of the concept of it is I'm doing this by myself right now and I'm doing it in San Diego and I'm trying to kind of re-evoke those feelings that we were talking about before of like giant, larger than life spectacles of movies in the 90s, 80s, whatever it may be.
yeah,
But doing it on a micro scale of kind of being a one-man band and doing it here in San Diego. So kind of the idea is to have that spectacle, but it's, I'm not in Hollywood. I'm not doing it in a giant, industry or anything like that. It's kind of like just being able to keep the spirit of it alive while being on a little island. It's kind of
yeah.
concept of it.
Yeah, I like the name. It's pretty like unique. I don't know. Like I just think about like the movies and then like the beach or something, just like because of the reef part.
And plus, I wanted to come up with a name that would hit in San Diego because we might as well add some kind of like San Diego-ness to
That's
what we're doing.
true.
That's the purpose, the second, not the secondary purpose, the simultaneous purpose of it is to be a San Diego film screening thing, that's specific for us here.
Yeah. And what's because right now we're in June, and when this drops it might be like, I don't know, I think I said September or something, or maybe August. But for those listening in, when is like the like what do you have planned for the future, like for this year? If any screenings that you can share.
Well, I can tell you that I'll say this, and if we might have to delete it if it's not happening. But
Okay.
in August, we're planning to be back at the 10th Avenue Arts Center, and we're going to be doing a double feature of TNT Jackson and Firecracker, which are two movies directed by Sirio Santiago, who is a Filipino exploitation director that worked with Roger Corman a lot in the 70s and the 80s. He cranked out a lot of awesome stuff. And these two movies are like beat for beat the same exact film. Like every part of the plot line is the same thing, but
Yeah.
it's a different movie. So I thought it would be fun to have the experience of kind of watching them back to back on a double feature, just
Hmm.
to kind of see if our brains explode while we watch it. And that's another example of movies that wouldn't get a shot anywhere else that Jeff is letting us show at the 10th Avenue Arts Center.
That's pretty
Um,
cool.
so that's
What's
happening.
what's the premise of those? Because I don't think I've seen them. I don't think I have.
Both films are about there's a woman who is on a revenge kick to try to figure out what's going on with a family member, and one of them I believe it's like her sister, and the other one is her brother.
Hmm.
But they're both kung fu and martial arts experts that
Mm.
kind of go into the underworld of crime to fight and understand what happened to their long lost
Like
family
siblings,
member.
or yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Interesting. Okay. That's
it's
pretty
pretty
cool.
cool.
And I was
And
gonna
other
say,
than that,
oh,
yeah,
go
we've
ahead,
got.
go ahead, go ahead. You were
Okay,
gonna
I
say
was gonna
any
say,
other screenings?
we're probably going to be doing a horror marathon of some sort in October.
Nice. Okay.
And I don't know what venue that's going to be at, but we're definitely planning on it. And I'm also planning on having a couple of guests stop by. Um, not for the horror marathon, maybe, but also during the horror season.
Okay, that'd be cool.
And yeah, I think that's all I can say for now because I have a
Okay.
lot of ideas that I just need to make sure they're,
Yeah.
confirmed.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool. That's exciting. There's a lot of things still. I mean, there's still like we're half the year, so it's still a long ways to go, and I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure more plans hopefully. Um, and talking about like horror films, because obviously like the podcast is hip hop and horror, so I kind of wanted to ask you like, what's your top five like horror movies that you
Oh,
or
wow.
you go to?
Top five. Damn, I don't
Yeah.
have like a ready-made like top five list.
Or
Let's
whatever
see.
comes to mind.
Um, Jesus. I'm gonna say what's coming to mind right now are a couple movies from the late '80s, From Beyond and Society.
Oh yeah, those
Um,
are good.
and From Beyond in particular was, going back to what I was saying before with kind of exploring my childhood fears or whatever. I had never even heard of that movie until I was about 20. And when I saw the trailer for it, I was like, this is literally like something that would have come out of one of my nightmares when I was like that age, when I was like 4 or 5 years old. And I don't know how, like, I don't know how I missed it. And I don't know how it was like so exact with like just like even like the lighting of all like in the bizarre, like just what the hell is this type of stuff. Like
Yeah.
those are a couple of my favorites. I mean, probably my favorite, as far as like this is like an awesomely structured and it resonates with me movie, I'd say is an American Werewolf in London.
Oh, I love that movie. Yeah.
And I know there are funny parts to it. I don't know why people always deem it as a horror comedy or they want to like, they almost try to like belittle it as a horror comedy. So it goes on
Yeah.
a real horror. I find it incredibly disturbing and I don't find it funny. I mean, there's humorous things in it.
Yeah.
So maybe, catching on something that most people aren't, but I really enjoy it. It bothers the hell out of me, so I don't watch it that much. I think it's one of my favorite horror movies for sure. Evil Dead 2 is another standby. I mean, that's like
Yeah.
a classic. Everyone loves that, but I'd
Yeah.
say that's definitely in the top five for me. And then let's see, we can round it out with something classy. Geez. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe I can just have four for now.
Okay. Yeah, those
What
are
about
good
you?
choices. Yeah. An American Werewolf in London is my top one too. Just because
Oh,
I
nice.
love it because like the werewolf transformation, I feel like for the time it was one of the best ones and it still holds up I think compared to like the newer ones.
Yeah.
And I
Great.
love the fun fact too that that movie is what inspired the Thriller music video because John Landis actually directed the Thriller music video for those that are listening in that might not know. But I thought it was really cool that he felt like Michael Jackson loved that movie and he was like, I want this guy to like direct it and I want to do some sort of like, stuff with like a transformation in my video. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. So I like that one. Fright Night, like the 80s version, is one of my
Okay.
favorites.
That's a great choice.
Um, what's another one? I like it's not like a favorite like I wouldn't say it's top five, but like just comes to mind is like just Friday the 13th. I don't have like a specific one. If anything, if I had to pick, I think I'd say like part seven, just because I like the look in that one where he versus
Okay.
the psychic, the Carrie or whatever.
Nice.
Um, and then I love Scream. I don't know. I just I feel like it's one of those movies I go to a lot. Like the first and the second one, and then the newer one was actually pretty decent. I like that one. That's what three,
Yeah.
right? Or is that four?
I think that's
Yeah,
four.
because it was American Werewolf in London, Fright Night, yeah, Friday the 13th, Scream, and then I'm trying to think what else. I'm like trying to look back here. Like it goes, sometimes I change, but like maybe like From Dusk Till Dawn. Like I don't know if you see Satanico
Oh,
like right behind me,
yeah.
like right here,
Yeah.
the little drawing.
Oh, okay. I
It's
can
the
see that
Satanico
now.
Pandemonium. Yeah, I love that film. I just love the mythology of it, and like I don't know if you ever watched the TV show on Netflix. Like Robert Rodriguez continued like the whole mythology, and I thought it was just interesting because it kind of goes with like my roots, like Mexican roots. So I thought it was cool how
Really?
they interwove that into the story.
I've been looking forward to watching that, and I haven't seen it yet, so I'll
Oh,
have
you
to
gotta
check it
watch
out.
it. The only thing is like disappointing is that it got canceled. It supposedly was gonna go on a hiatus, but it just never came back. So I was like, oh, it's so sad. And they have a good cast too. They have, I mean, all the same. You know how like what's it called? Adam Sandler. How he's the same cast. I feel like Robert Rodriguez does the same thing, where he has like
Yeah.
Cheech Marin, Danny Trejo. You know, like all like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
OGs are in there. So it's pretty cool. And then who is was Wilmer Valderrama, which was weird. He's like plays kind of like a villain um
Nice.
in the show. So yeah, it's pretty good.
I'll definitely.
Um, yeah, check it out and let me know when you do because I thought it was a really good show.
Cool.
And what else did I have here? I was gonna say too, what advice? Because like you said, there is also like the fun aspect of doing screenings, but there's also like the hard parts where you have to like actually do the screening, making sure everything runs smoothly. For you, what
Yeah.
advice would you give to someone that's maybe trying to get into like screening films?
I would say so far because I'm still relatively new at doing this.
Hmm.
I would say the biggest advice I would have given myself, looking back on it so far, is definitely can always have in your head exactly. I mean, and it's hard to define it, but exactly what you want to do and what you want to accomplish out of something. And then if you know that, I would definitely try to find people like at the venue you're going to work with that share that goal in some way.
Hmm.
Make sure that there's an alignment of vision. Um, because if that's not the case, then you might go in different directions, and you want to make sure that there's definitely an overlap in what the goal is and what you want this to be. I'd say.
Yeah, good advice. Yeah, because I know it's like sometimes people like want to jump into it, and like if you're not really like organized or like you said have something like in mind of what your vision, then
Yeah.
you might have bumps along the road. And then before we like move on to like your journalistic journey, I kind of want to ask you like a couple more horror questions.
Okay.
Um, what's like your favorite horror villain and why?
Favorite horror villain.
Yeah,
Jesus.
or icon.
That's a really good question, and that was another one that I had absolutely I did not prepare to answer here.
I've had some good ones too, because I've had some people say like characters that I didn't even really think of. Like somebody said, one of my last guests said the guy from Needful Things. I forgot the guy's name, the one that plays like the devil. I was like, oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. Jesus. Honestly, I don't know if I have an answer. I can tell you that I don't know. I think we talked about this before, but I've been a little unconvinced with Michael Myers as a villain over the years. Like I I've never really connected with the original Halloween series as far as him being scary. I like the movies, of course, but
Yeah.
I've never really. It's almost like it's scary because I'm missing something or something like that. That kind of
Yeah.
is how I felt.
Yeah.
Um, and then I have the unpopular opinion of me. I liked the Rob Zombie take
Oh,
on
I like that one too.
Michael Myers because you got to learn why and who he is. I think that I resonate with movies when you kind of know what the character is and then you kind of go on that journey with them as opposed to it being a mystery.
Yeah.
And I do think that David Gordon Green and the team with the new Halloween movies kind of found a balance between the two a little bit, especially
Hmm.
in the first of the new trilogy. And
Yeah.
I like um, that movie, the first one in the new trilogy, was the only one that actually really rocked me, like, and actually scared me after the fact. So
Yeah.
I'd say Michael Myers has improving over the years a little bit. I don't know if you do my favorite. Let me think of a favorite. Can we cut a little bit of this out?
Yeah, we can. We can. Like I'll
um,
save mine if you want while you
yeah,
think of
can
yours.
you
Like for me, it's Jason Voorhees. I don't know if you see him in the background, but I don't know. I like it's not that I find him scary or anything. I just thought he was like I don't know. It was dope. Like the mask. I mean, like a lot of rap icons have used it. Like was it Ghostface who uses the mask or whatever? But I don't know. I like it because I grew up watching him. I think it was one of the first like slashers I watched. So I think it has like a special like nostalgia, and
Oh, nice.
so I just like gravitate towards him. I just think he's dope. And then I just found out he's a Gemini like me, so I was like, okay, he's cool.
No shit. You know, I mean, I have a non-horror take. It's not. I don't
Okay.
think it's a horror film. I consider it a horror film. But have you ever seen the movie Romeo is Bleeding with
It
Gary Oldman and
sounds
Lena?
familiar, and I don't think I've seen it though.
And I think that Lena Olen's character in that like is just like really really terrifying and scares me more than like any horror movie I've ever seen.
Okay, I'll have
She's
to check
kind
it
of
out.
like this amalgamation of like of Gary Oldman, who's a crooked cop in the film,
Uh huh.
like his like twisted side and like the devil coming to haunt him all at the same time, and
Uh huh.
really like bothered me for days after. I'd say that at least of the recent past, that'd be my favorite. And I
Okay.
think
What was it called? Romeo is Bleeding.
the movie's called Romeo is Bleeding. Yeah,
Okay, I'll check that one out. And then what about like your favorite like final girl of a horror film?
Final Girl. It's a good question. I like Jill Schoelen in The Stepfather. I don't know if that's a final girl because it's not necessarily a
Like
slasher
horror?
movie.
Yeah.
I don't know, she resonated with me a lot.
Yeah.
And I enjoy that movie. I think she kind of fits that mold really well.
Yeah.
Um, I would say I don't know what her name is, but in Terrifier 2, I really liked the
Oh
take
yeah.
on the main girl in that. I think she did a really good job, and that was a fun movie.
Yeah, I just put up the
Favorite all
poster.
time. Just talking off the top of my head, I thought that was really something cool.
Yeah, she's really dope. Yeah, I like the costume too that they gave her, that she wore, like the angel wings and thing. That was pretty dope. Um, and what about as far as like I think I don't know if I had because I wanted to do like a quick trivia because I kind of want to mix it up too, like the because I asked like questions, but I'm like, oh, we could do trivia, so I started doing it in the last episode, couple episodes, but I'll do them real quick because some of them are like horror related. So, and feel free to let me know if you don't know it. So I try to do easy ones because the last time I feel like I went too hard and the guy was like, I don't know. I was like, okay,
Or the
um,
harder ones would be the ones that get, and the easy ones would be like
right.
ones that what. I don't know.
What film was where the character was famously known for asking, "Do you like scary movies?" I think it's an easy one, but
That's Scream, right?
yeah, yeah. And and what rapper was in the movie on Anaconda?
Ice Cube.
Okay. All right. And then I'll do two more. These are hip hop though. The other one is how old is hip hop turning this year?
50, I believe, right?
Yes. And then the last one here, what was the name of the game's debut album in 2005?
The documentary.
Yeah. Okay. I tried to make it easier this time because I
Those are
felt like I
easier than
went.
I thought. Right? Whew.
Yeah, one of the questions I asked last time was, which you probably might know because you're like a fan of like me of like directors and stuff. So I was like, who was the director of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
Toby Hooper.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I just kind of added that because I was like, it mixes things up, for the interview, so it's not just all like serious question after
Yeah.
question. And then talking about, like hip hop and all that stuff. Like I said, when I was kind of looking you up and like doing my research, I saw that you used to be, like a journalist, kind of slash music editor, and you kind of contributed a lot to like the West Coast music here or music scene, right? How did that come about? Like, how did that journey start?
So I've always been a big West Coast hip hop fan, and I think that journey for me started. I'm I'm originally from the Oxnard area, up a little
Okay.
bit north, and my family moved. We moved when I was like 3 years old. We moved over to the East Coast for about 5 years. And then I moved back here when I
Oh.
was 8 years old,
Hmm.
and I think that kind of move took a lot of I think it took a toll on me, and I was kind of trying to find like something to latch onto here. And I don't know how it happened, but I what I ended up latching onto was like Power 106 and the music they were playing in the late 90s. So like we would go back and forth because we were living in San Diego, but we would go up to my grandparents in Oxnard, and Power 106 being in LA, we would I don't think my parents would let me listen to that, but I was listening to it somehow when we were going back and forth, like on the weekends when we first moved here. And that was right at the time when Power 106 had started playing more West Coast hip hop on the air, and there was I mean, it was DJ Quick that was really hitting at the beginning, like for me,
Okay.
and even before I knew about Tupac and Snoop and all that, like I was became the biggest DJ Quick fan. So I just like really got into that music back then, and then it continued on through my teenage years, and I was like number one fan of anything West Coast hip hop, and was really into the online forum boards and all that where people would talk about it.
Hmm.
So when I was in college at SDSU, I ended up starting to do album reviews for a website called dubcnn.com because I was an active member on their forum and they were looking for someone to do that.
Yeah,
And the opportunity arose to interview DJ Quick
that's
because
cool.
a lot of the people that worked there were based overseas and they were looking for somebody to kind of do stuff that was available. And DJ Quick was doing a concert in San Diego with Bone Thugs and Harmony. So they had like an access to it, and they're like, "Hey, do you want to go and interview DJ Quick?" And I'm like, "Hell yeah!" Like, do I want to meet my favorite rapper? Yeah. So me and one of my best friends went over there, and I got to interview DJ Quick, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing at all. Um, and I think AMG was there too.
Oh wow.
And so I interviewed these guys, and then like this was all in one night. Like this dude pulled me aside after, and he was like this really surly guy, and he's like, "Hey, interview this guy too." And I'm like, "Okay, like sure, you got it, man." And it ended up being J Rock, and
Oh wow.
he had just signed to Warner Music, I believe, at the time. And he was coming out on the scene, but he had just recorded a couple of tracks with DJ Quick, and Quick was helping to promote him by kind of taking him along on the tour. I don't even think he performed that night, but so I interviewed J Rock, and then his friend that was just hanging out with him, I was like, "Hey, dude, are you a rapper too? Can I interview you too?" And he's like, "Yeah," and that ended up being Kendrick Lamar.
Oh wow.
And so we were all three of us were probably around the same age at the same time, and we were kind of hanging out in the background the rest of the night watching the show. But that was my first day in and then it was so fun and so cool that, I talked to the guys at WCNN and I was able to be kind of like the guy on the floor here, going up to LA and interviewing people. But then it kind of turned into more than that pretty
Hmm.
quickly because I was kind of around. I was majoring in marketing at the time, but I think I've always had kind of an instinct for it.
Hmm.
So, we would work on plans for someone had a new album coming out. Hey, when are we going to drop the single? Let's record this interview. Let's talk about these things. Let's do a behind the scenes thing. And so
Okay.
I worked with all sorts of, pretty much everybody, I think, in the Los Angeles hip hop scene. And this was between 20, not 20, 2007
Oh
and
wow.
2010.
Yeah.
Um, and then from there, I ended up meeting Damian Young, Demiza, who was the program director of Power 106 in the 90s. And he had just recently retired. But he took me under his wing and really taught me everything, not everything, but he taught me a lot of what he knew about working with artists
Hmm.
and I was kind of doing what he was doing on a very micro scale of working on a website rather than running the biggest radio station in the country.
Yeah.
But it was really a lot of help, and it was really cool. And I learned a ton about marketing and networking and PR and all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And then I also co-wrote his memoir with him because he
Oh,
was
wow.
working on it. So
Yeah.
I written by him in his voice, but I did some of the writing of it,
Yeah.
of
That's pretty
capturing
cool.
his voice and all that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the majority of what I did, and it was a lot of fun. And we premiered a lot of singles. That was back when it was before even like Dat Piff was really that big.
Okay.
I don't even know if that's a thing anymore because I'm not really into it as much.
Yeah.
But this was back when people were putting out mixtapes, and then we really kind of graduated to doing what we called street albums, which were full albums worth of material that these guys were just kind of waiting to put their major label album out. So they would put out a new album of tracks in the meantime to kind of
Hmm.
keep the fans excited. So it was right when like Twitter was just starting, and it was back when like when you had a website it was actually kind of meant something, and it was something worth checking out. It was an interesting like hybrid time because now it's everything's so oversaturated, but we were able to kind of create a little network within these websites that we did
Yeah.
to have people be excited about coming on it and being able to premiere something and let it be something that kind of had its own scene. So I, I think looking back on it, a lot of the artists that I work with ended up not having their major label albums end up coming out, which is a damn shame because they were the next
Mm.
generation of
Yeah.
West Coast hip hop. And really what ended up happening was kind of like backpack type rap became more popular because there were more blogs that popped up, and then suddenly the labels could quantify how many users were on and downloading stuff as opposed to like what was popular in the streets, which I think
Yeah.
is how a lot of West Coast hip hop artists got on in the first place.
Yeah.
So it kind of changed the game, and there were a lot of incredibly talented guys that now live through these like street album eras of like, oh yeah, I remember that track, even though it wasn't on the radio and
Hmm.
even though it wasn't on MTV or BET. But I still listen to that music too, and
Yeah.
it was a really interesting time, but it was really cool.
That's pretty cool. It kind of reminded me. I don't know if you've seen it too. I think it's like a new like a podcast that dropped maybe like a week or two ago. It's called The Blog Era, and it talks a little bit about like how the scene changed once the blogs like and how it impacted like hip hop, which is interesting. I haven't seen it or heard it yet, but I heard it's really good. It kind of just reminded me right now you're talking about that.
I'll have to check
Um,
that out. Yeah, it sounds like what happened.
yeah, yeah, and it's kind of cool like that you were kind of like in the scene like you said like seeing all these younger artists who are now like big like you said like Kendrick Lamar and stuff like that. Um, like who was your favorite? I'll say like I'll say it too. It's like who was your favorite like OG that you interviewed and why, and then who was like a new upcoming artist that maybe now is like a bigger artist, but like at the time like was cool to interview and why.
Yeah, I would say OG guy, my favorite was DJ Quick, and I'm not even saying that just because he's my favorite rapper, but
Yeah.
like he really is that cool, and he's
Mhm.
really a funny guy, and he's a really nice guy,
Mhm.
and he was really awesome to me. I've interviewed him a couple times on just the like the
Yeah.
first day I started, and he really kind of lived up to whatever. It's kind of weird to meet your idols and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
he one of them that has really
That's
lived
cool.
up to that. Warren G is also a really nice guy,
Okay.
and I had a lot of fun working with him. And as far as the newer guys, I really had a lot of fun working with Bishop Lamont,
Oh,
who was
he's
signed
dope.
to Dr. Dre.
Yeah.
Um, and we worked a lot together on coming up with strategy and that type of stuff. Me and him and Damien along the way there. And he was one of the bigger artists at that time because he was about to drop through Dre. It was going to be like, it was the game and then him.
Yeah.
And he did a lot of stuff to try to, he recorded hundreds of songs that he ended up putting out, and they're all, to me, I still think of them as an album that never was, but should be considered albums. So he was awesome, and got to give a big shout out to Demrick. At the time, we called him Young D, but he
Yeah.
was part of a group called Tangled Thoughts that Corrupt helped put on, and he came out from
Okay.
Philly, and he worked with me. Me and him worked on a radio show together called the West Coast Grind. We co-hosted it, and Damien produced it, and we had DJ Ill Will was our DJ for it.
Okay.
And we would interview guests weekly on there. But he's an amazing rapper, and he's really talented as a host, and just does a whole bunch of different things. He was a lot of fun to hang out with, a lot of fun to work with.
That's pretty cool. Like, what's like your standout moment? Like, being in that hip hop scene. Like, what was your standout moment besides the interviews and all that?
Hmm. One standout moment was, I think that the studio is closed now, but I was at Can Am, which was a very famous studio in LA that like Pac recorded All Eyes on Me at and stuff.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
a really cool studio, and I got to be there one time. I think it was with Bishop recording something,
Uh huh.
and Warren G was there, and I got to hang out and kind of watch a Laker game with them. So
Yeah.
that was pretty cool.
That's pretty
Um,
cool.
and there were a lot of studio sessions that Damien orchestrated over at this studio in Burbank that they called Area 51, which was a state-of-the-art studio. And
Okay.
um, one of the times, or for a couple of weeks actually, I think, um, they got to be able to orchestrate recording sessions for Detox, the Dr. Dre album that didn't end up coming out, but like everybody was rolling through to record songs. Dre wasn't there,
Yeah.
but they were recording kind of like demo tracks, like even like to theoretically have Dre rap this track, they would rap over it and like Dre and stuff. And
Uh huh.
met so many producers. Like I remember having a really good conversation with Jelly Roll, the producer who does a lot of stuff for Exhibit, and he did like On the Boulevard by Dr. Dre and Snoop. Um, and all the younger guys were there, but then like some of the OG guys came too, and it was like a
Hmm.
really cool time of unity and like
Yeah.
an exciting thing where people were like, hey, we can, if Detox comes out, it could be like 2001 again.
Yeah.
And that came out, so everyone kind of banded together and was working on that stuff, and a lot of incredible music came out of it too.
Yeah.
I still have some of it. I can't share that.
Well, hey, at least you have it for yourself for your private collection. um, and what made you like kind of leave the scene, like or like kind of distance yourself from that and not do it anymore?
Yeah. I don't really, I got kind of tired of doing the interviews and stuff like that. Like, because really the main thing I was doing on a day-to-day basis was I'd started my own website after I left WCNN, and I was doing interviews, and we'd have like the single drops and all
Hmm.
that type of stuff. And it just wasn't, after I've done it so many times, it wasn't really like fulfilling. And
Yeah.
I do miss it now, and I would like to do a little more of that. And,
Yeah.
even now with the film screenings, I am kind of doing that because I get to
Yeah.
interview people again. But I think I had learned enough from, my idols and from everyone with this music. And it just ended up becoming more of like a grind and like more like,
Mm.
I gotta do
Yeah.
this. And I really wanted to, after I wrote I helped write the book with Damien. I wanted to pursue something a little bit more creative.
Yeah.
I didn't really know that I like could write something, and then I wanted to kind of explore that. So when I continue to work on writing, I've been writing screenplays for a long time too. So
That's cool.
that kind of has fulfilled that outlet for me.
Yeah.
But the other thing that was the harsh reality of this whole thing is that like at around this time, like this is when like I was explaining before, those blogs kind of shifted things, and it wasn't as like potent or like impactful to do these types of things
Hmm.
because of the way that West Coast hip hop was kind of like dying on the vine because of the powers that be at the major labels.
Yeah.
So there wasn't as much stuff to cover.
Okay.
And that wasn't a conscious choice for me at that time, but looking back on it, that kind of it kind of ended up being around that time that kind of things a little bit dropped off. But
Okay. That's cool though. Like the impact and stuff like that, and getting to know like these artists is that's pretty cool. Um,
yeah.
and for you, like talking about like rappers, like either what's your top five like hip hop albums or rappers, whichever one you prefer.
Okay. I think I'll do top five albums.
Okay.
Uh, I'll do and I don't know if this would be in any necessarily particular order, but
Hmm.
I would go with DJ Quick Rhythmalism. That's probably my favorite album if I had to pick an album. And All Eyes on Me is my other favorite album, and it's probably most people's favorite album.
Yeah.
But then I would go with Life in 1472 by Jermaine Dupri. And I know that's not a West Coast hip hop album, but that just, for whatever reason, personally, I probably listened to that album more than anything else. Um, let's see. Rounding out the top five here. It has to be all hip hop albums.
Yeah.
Uh, okay. Um, I would pick. Give me just a second because
Yeah, you have two more.
I'm gonna go with Dub C, the shadiest one. I think that's just a really awesome album from start to finish.
Okay.
Um, and then I have one more. I'm gonna pick TQ. They Never Saw Me Coming, even though that's technically an R&B album,
Yeah.
but I do feel like it has enough hip hop in it to
Yeah.
count as something. And that said movie, it is like a movie. That
Yeah.
album, just blows my mind every time I listen to it, and it was really pioneering at the time and since, because I don't think anyone has been able to sing like that and be as gangster as that. I mean, Nate
Yeah.
Dogg too.
That's true.
Um, yeah.
Cool. Cool
What about
choices.
you?
Mine's always changing. I think a college dropout. I don't know. I love Kanye, so I know it's like unpopular opinion with all this stuff that he's done, but like I think he's still like a genius. So the college dropout, because I played it a lot. I feel like
Okay.
um, Common, Finding Forever probably would be that one, or the B album, one of those two. What's another one? Biggie. I think Life After Death. I played it a little bit more than Ready to Die. That's three,
Okay.
right? That's three.
Three.
Um, I was just thinking about this the other day. There was two. What's the other one that I had? Um, Trying to think. It was Kanye, Common. Oh, Eminem. I think like I like the Eminem show. I feel like that was his last best album in my opinion. And then the Marshall Matters LP. Yeah. So those would be it. Yeah.
You go with two Eminem ones.
Yeah, I'll choose those two because I'm trying to think of anything else. Let me see, because I always go to like my top five rappers, and that's how I kind of like figure out like who else did I miss. Obviously, like yeah, Tupac probably I would put up there too. I don't know if it's All Eyes on Me or Me Against the World. One of those two. Because I
Yeah,
like the tracks. Like it's kind of hard to like pick. I think with him because he has like good tracks on both albums. You know.
totally.
Yeah.
Good choice.
Thank you. And then before we get out of here, I usually like to end it with this question:
Okay.
what kind of legacy would you like to leave behind, either creatively or personally?
That's a really good question. Creatively, I think that, contributing to the zeitgeist, if you will, of Southern California culture, I want to leave some sort of lasting impact. I mean, I think I've done that a little bit tangentially so far.
Hmm.
But I want to have like things that I've specifically created be part of that too. I'd say that's my goal with that, and I'd be pretty happy leaving that as a legacy behind. And personally, I just, want people that I know to, think of me as someone they can rely on and someone they can, trust, and that we can, continue to do good things together.
Dope, yeah, yeah, and like I said, keep doing what you're doing as far as like the film screen, whatever you do creatively. Feel free, if you ever want to promote or even come back. I always tell people like feel free to come back and we'll talk about any other things that you got going on. And I
Yeah.
appreciate your time and like sharing your journey because it's really interesting. Like I think you're like kind of like one of the I call them like a perfect guest because you have a little bit of like horror kind of background as far as like the film screenings, which you do more than horror. You do other type of genres, but that and then also like the hip hop side to your story, which is really interesting. And yeah, thank you so much. Is there anything else you wanted to share or shout out before we get out of here?
I just want to say thank you for having me on, Gabby, and you've been a great host. And this was really fun to kind
Yeah.
of recount these things and put it out there. It was
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Yeah, no, you have it. Like I think one of our friends that we had on the other podcast I have, he said how he didn't really think about like him filming himself is kind of like a legacy, I guess he's leaving for his kids because like they'll go back and watch
Yeah.
like his dad, and I was like, oh yeah, that's really interesting. Like, so it's kind of like we're kind of like recording like your journey, and you can always show it to like a family member, or you have end up having kids, like they can kind of see like how your journey's been. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. And for those, tuning in, go ahead and follow Popcorn Reef. I'll go ahead and put his IG on the description, and anything that he has going on, I'll share on there because, like I said, this might drop in the future, probably August or September. But yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. Subscribe, share, like, all that would be appreciated. And thank you again, Eddie, for being on.
Thank you, Gabby.
Alrighty. Take care.